45 minutes stood between Daniel Harper and total ruin, with an eviction notice in his pocket and a sick daughter waiting at home. The job interview at Vanguard Holdings was his absolute last hope. He was desperate. He was ready. But then he saw her, a woman lying broken in a dark alley, ignored by the rushing city. In that split second, Daniel had to choose secure his own survival or save a stranger bleeding out in the rain. He chose the stranger. He thought he had thrown away his life, never suspecting the woman shivering in his arms was the billionaire CEO who could change it forever. The silence in the tiny one-bedroom apartment in East London was heavier than the damp air outside. It was 5:30 a.m., and Daniel Harper was already awake, staring at the ceiling stain that looked disturbingly like a map of a sinking island. He sat up the springs of the fold-out couch, groaning in protest. He rubbed his face, feeling the grit of sleeplessness in his eyes. Today was the day, Tuesday, November the 14th. The day that would either pull him out of the suffocating quicksand of poverty or bury him in it completely. Daniel walked softly to the bedroom door, cracking it open just enough to see the small lump under the pink duvet. Lily, 6 years old. She was sleeping soundly, clutching the stuffed rabbit that was missing an ear. On the nightstand beside her sat the terrifying lineup, an inhaler, a bottle of steroids, and the frighteningly empty box of her nebulizer solution. He gently closed the door. He couldn't look at the medicine. The pharmacy had made it clear yesterday, no insurance, no credit, no refill. He had 3 days of doses left. He went to the kitchen, a generous term for the corner of the room, with a sink and a hot plate and boiled water. He skipped the coffee. The jar was empty. Hot water with a slice of lemon would have to trick his stomach into thinking it was fed. On the counter sat the letter. Final notice, eviction proceedings. The bold red font seemed to scream at him. He owed 3 months of back rent to Mr. Henderson, a landlord whose patience had evaporated precisely 48 hours ago. But today was the lifeline. Vanguard Holdings. It was one of the largest property development firms in the UK. They were looking for a senior project manager for their new waterfront redevelopment. It was a role Daniel was overqualified for, yet desperately underqualified on paper, due to the 2-year gap in his resume, the 2 years he had spent nursing his wife Sarah, until the cancer finally took her. The recruiter, a man named Simon Kress, had been blunt. They don't usually look at guys who've been out of the game this long, Daniel, but I pulled strings. You have a meeting with the Director of Operations at 9:00 a.m. sharp. Do not be late. Do not look desperate. This is a shark tank. Daniel shaved with a dull razor, nicking his chin. He swore under his breath, dabbing it with a piece of toilet paper. He couldn't walk into a 6-figure interview bleeding. He put on his suit. It was a charcoal Brooks Brothers suit, a relic from his old life. It was slightly tight around the shoulders now construction work had broadened him, but it was clean. He polished his shoes until they reflected the dim light of the hallway. He woke Lily at 6:30 a.m. She was groggy, her breathing slightly wheezy. "Daddy, are you wearing the magic suit?" she asked, rubbing her eyes. Daniel forced a smile, crouching down to button her coat. "I am Lil Bit. The magic suit is going to get us a castle, or at least a place with heating that works. And strawberry ice cream. Gallons of it." He dropped her off at Mrs. Gable's apartment downstairs. Mrs. Gable was 70, partially deaf, and the only reason Daniel could work odd jobs. She took the wrinkled £5 note he offered, though he saw the pity in her eyes. "Knock 'em dead, Danny," she wheezed. Daniel stepped out into the street. It was pouring rain, a cold, relentless London downpour that soaked through cheap umbrellas in minutes. He checked his watch. 7:15 a.m. The interview was across the city at Canary Wharf. The tube would take 45 minutes if it ran smoothly. He was giving himself nearly 2 hours. He couldn't afford a taxi. He walked to the subway station, his head down, protecting the magic suit under a trench coat that had seen better days. His phone buzzed. It was Mr. Henderson. Daniel sent it to voicemail. He couldn't deal with the threats right now. He needed to be a shark. He needed to be the man he used to be, confident, sharp, unbreakable. He swiped his Oyster card. Insufficient funds. No, Daniel whispered, tapping it again. The red light glared at him. He checked his pockets. He had exactly £3 in coins. The fare was more. He had to take the bus. The bus would take twice as long. Panic flared in his chest, hot and sharp. He checked his watch. 7:30 a.m. If he took the bus to the transfer point and ran the last mile, he could still make it by 8:45 a.m. He ran out of the station, splashing through a puddle that soaked his right sock. He didn't care. He caught the number 38 bus, just as the doors were closing, shoving his coins into the machine. He squeezed into the back, surrounded by the smell of wet wool and exhaustion. He closed his eyes and rehearsed his answers. My greatest weakness, I care too much about the details. Why the gap in employment? I was managing a private healthcare project. He wouldn't tell them the project was his dying wife. Sharks ate the wounded. The bus crawled. Traffic was a nightmare. A delivery truck had jackknifed on Oxford Street. By the time Daniel got off at the transfer point, it was 8:20 a.m. He had 40 minutes to cover 3 miles. He began to run. The rain had intensified. It was coming down in sheets now, blurring the world into grey and neon smudges. Daniel kept his trench coat buttoned tight, his dress shoes slapping against the pavement. His breath came in ragged bursts. 8:35 a.m. He was making good time. He could see the skyline of the financial district looming in the distance, steel and glass piercing the grey clouds. Vanguard Holdings was in the Pinnacle Tower, the tallest of them all. He turned down a side street, a shortcut he remembered from his old days working in the city. It was a narrow alley behind a row of high-end bistros and loading docks. It was quieter here, the roar of the city muffled by the brick walls. That was why he heard the sound so clearly. It wasn't a scream. It was a sickening thud, followed by the screech of tires peeling away on wet asphalt. Daniel skidded to a halt, looking toward the end of the alley. A black SUV with tinted windows was reversing aggressively, its bumper hanging loose. It spun around and tore out of the alley, clipping a dumpster as it fled. In the space the car had vacated, a figure lay on the ground. Daniel's internal clock screamed 8:42 a.m. He had 18 minutes to get to the lobby, get through security, and get to the 41st floor. He was less than a mile away. He took a step toward the main road. Just keep running. A voice in his head hissed. Someone else will call 911. You have Lily to think about. You have the eviction. You have the medicine. He took another step away. Then the figure moved. A hand reached up, trembling, grasping at the air, and then fell back down into a puddle of oily water. Damn it, Daniel growled. He turned and sprinted toward the figure. It was a woman. She was older, perhaps in her late 50s or early 60s, dressed in a sleek beige power suit that was now ruined by grime and blood. Her silver hair was plastered to her face. A high-heeled shoe lay 10 feet away. Daniel dropped to his knees, the water immediately soaking through his suit trousers. "Ma'am? Can you hear me?" She groaned, her eyes fluttering. They were a piercing, icy blue, clouded with shock. "My bag," she wheezed. "Forget the bag," Daniel said, scanning her. Her leg was twisted at an unnatural angle. Blood was seeping rapidly from a gash on her forehead, mixing with the rain. She was shaking violently. Shock was setting in. "Ma'am, don't move. I'm calling an ambulance." Daniel fumbled for his phone with wet hands. He dialed 999. "Emergency services. Which service?" "Ambulance. I have a hit-and-run victim. Female, roughly 60. Severe head trauma, possible broken leg. She's going into shock." "Location." "Alley behind the Blackwood Bistro on 4th and King." "We have a backlog due to the weather. ETA is 15 minutes. Stay on the line." 15 minutes. Daniel looked at his watch. 8:46 a.m. If he stayed for 15 minutes, he would miss the 9 a.m. slot. Simon Kress had been Hall. Clear. Director Penhaligon does not wait. If you aren't in the chair at 9 o'clock, the door is locked. The woman gripped his wrist. Her grip was surprisingly strong. "Cold," she whispered. "So cold." She was going hypothermic. The pavement was freezing and the rain was relentless. Daniel looked at the tower in the distance. It looked like a beacon of salvation. If he ran now, he could leave an anonymous tip and make it. He looked down at the woman. She reminded him just for a second of his mother. "Okay," Daniel said, his voice breaking. "Okay. I've got at you." He unbuttoned his trench coat, his only shield against the rain, and took it off. He draped it over her. Then, realizing it wasn't enough, he took off his suit jacket. The charcoal Brooks Brothers jacket. The armor he needed for the battle upstairs. He wrapped it around her shoulders, tucking it under her head to keep her face out of the puddle. Now Daniel was kneeling in the freezing rain in a white dress shirt, which was instantly transparent and clinging to his skin. "Stay with me," Daniel said, rubbing her hands to generate heat. "What's your name?" She blinked her eyes, struggling to focus on him. Evelyn." "Okay, Evelyn. I'm Daniel. Help is coming. You just need to keep your eyes open." 8:55 a.m. His phone buzzed. It was Simon, the recruiter. "Where are you? Kress is in the lobby." Daniel ignored it. He kept talking to Evelyn. "Do you have family, Evelyn? Someone I should call?" "No," she murmured. "Just work. Always work." "Well, work can wait," Daniel said bitterly. "Trust me, I know." The rain turned into hail. Daniel shivered uncontrollably, his teeth chattering. He curled his body over hers to shield her face from the ice pellets. He was sacrificing his health, his interview, his future for a woman who thought only of work. 9:05 a.m. The time came and went. The deadline passed. Daniel felt a hollowness in his stomach that had nothing to do with hunger. It was the feeling of a door slamming shut forever. He pictured Lily's face. He pictured the eviction notice. "I failed you, baby girl," he thought, tears mixing with the rain on his face. "I'm so sorry." Finally, sirens wailed nearby. Blue lights flashed against the brick walls. Paramedics swarmed the alley. They pushed Daniel aside efficiently. "Sir, are you injured?" one asked, seeing Daniel shivering in his soaked shirt. "No." Daniel stuttered, his lips blue. "Just cold." They loaded Evelyn onto the stretcher. She had an oxygen mask on now, but as they lifted her, She pulled it down. She looked frantically around until her eyes locked on Daniel. "Your jacket," she rasped. "Keep it," Daniel said, his voice dull. "I don't need it where I'm going." "Name?" she whispered. "What is your name?" "Daniel Harper," he said softly. The doors slammed shut. The ambulance sped away. Daniel stood alone in the alley. He was soaked to the bone, half-dressed and unemployed. He checked his phone. Simon Cress. "Don't bother coming. Penhaligon is furious. You're blacklisted, Daniel. What the hell is wrong with you?" Daniel dropped the phone into his pocket. He leaned against the wet brick wall and slid down until he hit the ground, burying his face in his hands. The journey back to East London was a blur of humiliation and physical misery. Daniel walked the entire 4 miles. He didn't have the money for the bus, and even if he did, he doubted the driver would let him on. He looked like a madman, soaked to the skin, wearing a translucent white dress shirt that clung to his shivering frame, mud splattered up to his knees, and his expensive suit jacket missing. Passers-by gave him a wide berth. A group of teenagers near Whitechapel laughed and filmed him on their phones as he trudged past, shivering violently. Daniel kept his head down, staring at the cracks in the pavement. He was too numb to feel shame anymore. The cold had seeped into his marrow, but the icy dread in his heart was colder. He reached his building at 11:30 a.m. He didn't have his keys. They were in the pocket of the suit jacket he had wrapped around Evelyn. He stood before the peeling blue door of the apartment complex, pressing the buzzer for Mrs. Gable. His teeth were chattering so hard he could barely control his jaw. Buzz. No answer. Buzz. "Hello?" Mrs. Gable's voice crackled tinny and suspicious. "Mrs. Gable, it's Daniel." "Danny, good Lord, come in, child. Push the door." He stumbled into the hallway. It smelled of boiled cabbage and old carpet, a scent that usually depressed him, but now felt like a warm embrace. He climbed the stairs to the 2nd floor, leaving wet footprints on the linoleum. Mrs. Gable was waiting in her doorway, clutching her shawl. Her eyes widened behind her thick glasses when she saw him. "Oh, my stars!" she gasped, ushering him in. "What happened? Were you mugged? Where is the suit?" I lost it." Daniel managed to say, his voice a hoarse croak. He collapsed onto Mrs. Gable's floral sofa, shaking uncontrollably. "Is Lily okay? She's watching cartoons. She's fine." "But look at you. You're blue." She bustled away, returning with a scratchy wool blanket and a mug of tea, so hot the steam was thick. Daniel wrapped the blanket around himself, but he couldn't stop shaking. "The interview?" Mrs. Gable asked softly, handing him the tea. "Did you make it?" Daniel stared into the dark liquid. He could lie. He could say it went well, that they were deliberating. It would buy him a few hours of dignity. But he was too tired for lies. "No," he whispered. "I didn't go." Mrs. Gable paused. She didn't ask why. She just looked at his defeated posture and sighed a long, rattling sound. "Mr. Henderson was here, Danny. About an hour ago." Daniel's head snapped up. The motion made the room spin. "What, he never comes in the morning? He was looking for you. He had a man with him, a big man, carrying a toolbox." Panic, hot and adrenaline-fueled, pierced through Daniel's exhaustion. A toolbox meant only one thing. Lock changes. "Where are they?" "They went up to your unit. I told them you were at a big interview, that you'd have the money by tonight. Mr. Henderson." He laughed, Danny. He said, "I've heard that song before." Daniel threw off the blanket. He ignored Mrs. Gable's protest and sprinted out of her apartment up the stairs to the 3rd floor. His door was open. Mr. Henderson, a man shaped like a bowling ball with a comb-over that defied gravity, was standing in the middle of Daniel's living room. A burly man in grey coveralls was kneeling at the front door, drilling into the lock mechanism. "Stop!" Daniel shouted, leaning against the doorframe, gasping for air. "What are you doing?" Henderson turned slowly. He looked Daniel up and down with a sneer of disgust. "Well, well, the executive returns. You look like you swam across the Thames, Harper." "You can't change the locks," Daniel said, stepping into the room. "I have rights. I have a child." "You have a lease that expired 3 months ago." Henderson counted, his voice oily and calm. "And you have a debt of £4,000. I've been generous, Harper. I've been a saint. But saints have bills, too." "I can get the money," Daniel pleaded. He hated the sound of his own voice, weak begging. "I just need a few more days. I had a situation today." Henderson scoffed. "A situation, right. Did the dog eat your rent money, or did you spend it on booze? You look like you've been on a bender." "I saved a woman's life." Daniel yelled the injustice of it, finally breaking his composure. The workman at the door paused the drill, looking up. Henderson just rolled his eyes. "Save it for the novel you're never going to write," Henderson said. "You're out, today. I'm legally allowed to secure my property. You have until sundown to clear your things, or the boys from the removal company will toss it in the skip tomorrow morning." Sundown. That's 6 hours away. Where am I supposed to go with a 6-year-old girl? "Not my problem," Henderson said, checking his watch. "You're a grown man, Harper. Figure it out." He signaled the workman. The drill whirred back to life, the sound screaming like a dentist's drill in Daniel's headache-riddled skull. Henderson brushed past Daniel, deliberately bumping his shoulder. "Leave the keys on the counter. Oh, wait, we're changing the locks. Keep them as a souvenir." Daniel stood in the middle of the room as the landlord walked away. The apartment, with its peeling wallpaper and the stain on the ceiling, suddenly looked like the most beautiful place on earth, simply because it was being taken away. He walked into the bedroom. He pulled a suitcase from under the bed. It was the same suitcase he and Sarah had taken on their honeymoon to Italy. He started packing Lily's clothes. His hands were shaking so hard he couldn't fold them. He just stuffed them in pink t-shirts, worn-out jeans, the extra nebulizer mask. He found a photo of Sarah on the dresser. She was laughing, the wind blowing her hair across her face. "I'm sorry," Daniel whispered, to the photo tears finally spilling over. "I tried. I really tried." He zipped up the suitcase. It was time to go downstairs and tell his daughter that they were homeless. The hotel was a generous name for the establishment Daniel found. It was a hostel on the outskirts of Hackney that accepted cash and didn't ask for ID. The room was the size of a closet, smelling of bleach and stale tobacco. It had bunk beds and a single window that looked out onto a brick wall. It cost £40 a night. Daniel had sold his watch, a Tag Heuer, that Sarah had given him for his 30th birthday, at a pawn shop on the way. The broker had given him £200 for a watch worth £2,000. Daniel had taken it without bargaining. He needed a roof over Lily's head immediately. It was now Wednesday morning. The rain had stopped, replaced by a harsh, grey, overcast sky. Daniel sat on the bottom bunk, staring at his phone. It was silent. No calls from recruiters. No calls from friends. Those had dried up years ago when he stopped being Daniel the project manager and became Daniel the widower who needs money. Lily was sitting on the top bunk, her legs dangling over the side. She was colouring in a book, but her movements were slow. She coughed every few minutes, a wet, rattling sound that made Daniel's stomach clench. "Daddy!" "Yeah, sweetie." "Why is the shower down the hall?" "It's an adventure," Daniel said, forcing a brightness into his voice that he didn't feel. "Like camping. Remember we talked about camping? Camping is outside, with bears. Well, this is city camping. No bears, just us." He checked his phone again. He opened his email. He had sent 3 apologies to Simon Kress, the recruiter. Subject: explanation for yesterday. Subject: please read. Emergency. Subject: apology. All unread or deleted. Daniel stood up. His body ached. He felt feverish, a lingering effect of the hypothermia he had courted yesterday, but he couldn't afford to be sick. "Lily, I need to go out for a bit, to find us a new castle. Mrs. Gable is going to come to sit with you, okay?" Mrs. Gable had agreed to take the bus up to watch Lily for a few hours. She was a saint, but she was also old. Daniel couldn't rely on her forever. "Okay," Lily said quietly. "Don't forget the strawberry ice cream." "I won't." Daniel walked out into the cold morning air. He had a plan. It was a desperate one. He was going to go to the construction sites in the area. He wouldn't ask for a project manager role. He would ask for labor. Carrying bricks, mixing cement, sweeping debris. Anything that paid cash at the end of the day. He walked for 3 hours. At the first sight, the foreman laughed at his suit trousers. He was still wearing the bottom half of his suit, paired with a cheap sweater he'd bought at a charity shop. "You're dressed for a board meeting, mate, not a brickyard." At the second sight, they told him they were fully staffed. At the third, a foreman looked him over and offered him £4 an hour under the table. Less than half minimum wage. "I'll take it," Daniel said. He spent the next 6 hours hauling bags of cement up 4 flights of stairs. His muscles screamed. His hands, soft from office work and caretaking, blistered and bled. The dust clogged his throat, making him cough almost as badly as Lily. By 4:00 p.m. he was broken. He took the £24 the foreman threw at him and walked to the nearest Tesco. He bought a loaf of bread, a jar of peanut butter, a pint of milk, and a small tub of strawberry ice cream. He had failed. £24 wouldn't even cover tomorrow's night at the hostel. Meanwhile, 5 miles away, the atmosphere was very different. The private suite at St. Jude's Hospital was quiet, smelling of fresh lilies and antiseptic. Evelyn Sterling sat up in the bed, wincing as she adjusted her position. Her head was bandaged, and her left leg was encased in a heavy cast. She had 3 cracked ribs and a severe concussion. But her mind was sharp. Sharper than it had been in years. Standing at the foot of her bed was Robert Vance, her chief of staff. Robert was a man who could intimidate terrifying board members with a single raised eyebrow. But right now he looked nervous. "We've filed the police report, Evelyn," Robert said, scrolling through his tablet. "The CCTV from the bistro caught the SUV. It was a stolen vehicle. Police are tracking it, but the driver is likely long gone." Evelyn waved her hand dismissively. "I don't care about the driver, Robert. I care about the man. The man. The one who pulled me out of the puddle. The one who gave me his coat." Evelyn looked at the chair in the corner of the room. Draped over it was a charcoal suit jacket. It was stained with mud and blood, stiff and ruined. It was a Brooks Brothers jacket, size 42. Regular. Not cheap, but old. "I need to find him," Evelyn said. Evelyn, the paramedics, said he was just a bystander. He left before they could get a statement. "He saved my life, Robert. I was freezing to death. He took the shirt off his back, literally, and wrapped me in it. He stayed with me when he could have run. And he said something." Evelyn closed her eyes, trying to grasp the hazy memory, through the fog of her concussion. The rain, the cold, the man's face pale and desperate. "I don't need it where I'm going," he had said about the jacket. "He had somewhere to be," Evelyn said, opening her eyes. He was checking his watch. Constantly. He was frantic. But he stayed. "Do we have a name?" Robert asked. "Daniel," Evelyn said. "Daniel. Harper, I think." Robert tapped on his tablet. "Daniel Harper. Common name. London has hundreds." "Check the jacket," Evelyn commanded. Robert sighed, walked over to the ruined jacket, and picked it up. He patted the pockets. "It's empty, Evelyn. Just a lint wrapper, and—" He paused, feeling the inside breast pocket. He pulled out a small, soggy piece of cardstock. It was warped by the water, the ink running. "What is it?" "It looks like an appointment card." Robert squinted. "From a recruitment agency. Apex Executive Search." Evelyn's eyes narrowed. "Apex, we use them. Who is the contact?" "The name is smeared. Looks like Simon K. Kress." "Get Simon Kress on the phone. Now." "Evelyn, it's 5:30 p.m., and you need rest." "Robert," Evelyn said, her voice dropping to that terrifyingly calm register that made her the most feared CEO in London. "If you don't have Simon Kress on that phone in 30 seconds, you will be looking for a new job." Robert dialed. 30 seconds later, he handed the phone to Evelyn. "This is Simon Kress," the voice on the other end said, sounding irritated. "Who is this?" "This is Evelyn Sterling, CEO of Vanguard Holdings." There was a silence on the line so profound it felt like a vacuum. Then a stammering, panicked noise. "Ms. Sterling. My apologies, I didn't—" "To what do I owe the honor?" "Simon, did you have a candidate scheduled for an interview with my director of operations yesterday morning? A man named Daniel Harper." "Harper." Simon let out a harsh, derisive laugh before he could stop himself. "Oh yes, that was the disaster. I am so sorry, Miss Sterling. He was a complete no-show. Wasted Director Penhaligon's time. I've blacklisted him. You won't ever have to hear that name again." Evelyn's grip on the phone tightened until her knuckles were white. "A no-show," she repeated softly. "Yes. Ghosted us. Irresponsible. Typical of someone with a resume gap like his, honestly. He claimed he wanted the job, but clearly—" "He was with me," Evelyn interrupted. Sorry. He didn't miss the interview because he was irresponsible, Simon. He missed it because he was busy saving my life in an alleyway 3 blocks from your office." Silence again. He saved you. He sacrificed the biggest opportunity of his life to help a stranger," Evelyn said, her voice trembling with a mixture of rage and awe. "And you blacklisted him." I didn't know." "Find him," Evelyn commanded. "I don't have his current address. His file just has an email and a phone number. I've tried calling him to yell at him I mean to debrief, but he goes to voicemail. Send me his file. Immediately." Evelyn hung up the phone and looked at Robert. "He missed the interview at Vanguard," she said, the realization hitting her hard. "My company. He was coming to work for me." "Irony is a cruel mistress," Robert murmured. "It's not irony. It's a debt," Evelyn said. She threw the covers off her good leg. "Evelyn, you cannot leave this bed." "I'm not leaving yet," she said, wincing as pain shot through her ribs. "But I need you to do something. I need you to hire a private investigator. Use the number in the file. trace the phone. Find out where Daniel Harper is sleeping tonight. And when we find him..." Evelyn looked at the muddy jacket on the chair. She remembered the warmth of it, the only thing that had stood between her and death. "When we find him," she said, "we're going to give him the interview he missed. But first I want to know everything about him. Why he has a gap in his resume. Why he looked so hungry. Why he had such sadness in his eyes." "I'll get on it," Robert said, sensing the shift in the room. This wasn't just a thank you mission anymore. This was a corporate takeover of a man's life. "Robert?" "Yes, Evelyn. Bring the car around at 8:00 a.m. tomorrow. I don't care what the doctors say. I'm checking out." Thursday morning broke over London with a cruel iron-grey light. Inside the Starlight Hostel, the air was thick with the sound of coughing. Daniel sat on the edge of the lower bunk, his head in his hands. Lily was finally asleep, but her breathing was shallow and fast. The nebulizer solution was gone. He had squeezed the last drop out at 4 a.m. Without a refill, the next 24 hours were a ticking time bomb. He checked his wallet. £14 left. Not enough for medicine. Not enough for another night at the hostel. He had hit the wall. There were no more moves to make. Meanwhile, across the city, a sleek black Mercedes Maybach was gliding through the morning traffic. In the back seat, Evelyn Sterling sat stiffly, her casted leg propped up on a specialized cushion. She was pale, her head throbbing with the rhythm of the car's engine, but her eyes were locked on the man sitting opposite her. "Read it to me again, Robert," she said, her voice tight. Robert Vance held a manila folder as if it were a loaded gun. He looked uncomfortable. "Evelyn, are you sure you want to hear the rest? It's grim." "Read it." Robert cleared his throat, adjusting his glasses. Subject: Daniel James Harper. Age 32. Former senior project manager at Devout Construction. Employment terminated 2 years and 4 months ago. Reason: voluntary resignation. His wife, Sarah Harper, was diagnosed with stage 4 glioblastoma. Brain cancer. Daniel liquidated his 401k, his savings, and sold their home in Chelsea to pay for experimental treatments in Switzerland. None of them were covered by insurance. Evelyn looked out the window at the passing city. He spent everything to save her. Everything, Robert confirmed. She passed away 14 months ago. By then the debt was over £50,000. He's been working odd jobs, construction delivery, cleaning, to pay off the remaining medical bills and support his daughter Lily, age 6. "And the housing situation?" Evelyn asked, dreading the answer. Robert hesitated. "This is the worst part, Evelyn. The address on his file, the apartment in East London, is no longer his. I spoke to the landlord this morning. Daniel was evicted on Tuesday." Evelyn turned slowly to face him. "Tuesday? The day of the interview?" "Yes. The landlord gave him a final ultimatum: pay the arrears by noon on Tuesday or get out. The interview at Vanguard was his Hail Mary. If he had gotten the job, he could have shown the offer letter to the landlord and stayed." The silence in the car was suffocating. Evelyn felt a wave of nausea that had nothing to do with her concussion. He was running to the interview to save his home. Evelyn whispered, the realization settling on her like a physical weight. He was minutes away from salvation, and then he saw me. "He stopped," Robert said softly. "He knew the consequences. He knew if he stopped, he'd miss the slot. He'd lose the apartment. He did it anyway." Evelyn closed her eyes. She remembered the cold rain. She remembered him wrapping his jacket around her, the jacket he needed to look professional. She remembered him saying, "I don't need it where I'm going." He wasn't talking about going to a new job. He was talking about going to the streets. Where is he now? Evelyn demanded, opening her eyes. They were wet with tears. A tracker on his phone which we legally shouldn't have access to, but I pulled strings places him at a low-end hostel in Hackney. But the signal is moving. He's on the move. Where is he going? Robert checked his tablet. He's heading south, toward Canary Wharf. He's coming to the office, Evelyn said, a spark of hope igniting. Why? Maybe to beg for a second chance, Robert suggested. Or maybe to collect his jacket. Driver, Evelyn barked, pressing the intercom button. Drive faster. Get us to the Pinnacle Tower, now. Daniel was indeed heading to the tower. It was a walk of pure desperation. He had left Lily with Mrs. Gable, who had agreed to watch her at the hostel for 2 hours. He had lied to Mrs. Gable, telling her he had a call back. The truth was, he was going to beg. He was wearing his stained trousers and the cheap sweater. He looked nothing like a project manager. He looked like exactly what he was, a homeless man, holding on to the last shred of his dignity. He walked into the massive glass lobby of the Pinnacle Tower. The security guards at the desk eyed him immediately. The smell of the high-end air freshener, white tea and thyme, made him feel dizzy. He approached the reception desk. The receptionist, a young woman with a perfectly tight ponytail, didn't even look up from her screen. "Deliveries are at the back dock," she said monotonously. "I'm not a delivery," Daniel said. His voice was raspy. "I need to speak to Simon Cress, or Director Penhaligon." The woman looked up, her nose wrinkled slightly. "Do you have an appointment?" "No, I had one on Tuesday. I missed it due to a medical emergency. I just need 5 minutes to explain. Please. It's a matter of life and death." "Sir, without an appointment I can't." "Well, well," a voice boomed from the elevators behind the desk. "Look what the cat dragged in. And I mean that literally." Daniel froze. He recognized the voice from the phone calls. Simon Cress walked across the polished marble floor. He was a sharp-featured man in a navy pinstripe suit that cost more than Daniel's total lifetime debt. He held a latte in one hand and a phone in the other. "Simon," Daniel said, turning to face him. "Please, just listen. I listened to the silence in the boardroom on Tuesday, Harper." Simon sneered, stopping a safe distance away, as if poverty were contagious. "Do you have any idea how bad you made me look? I stuck my neck out for you. He's a diamond in the rough, I told them, and you ghosted." "I didn't ghost," Daniel said, his hands balling into fists at his sides. "There was an accident. A woman was hit by a car. I stopped to help her." Simon laughed. It was a loud, barking sound that drew the attention of everyone in the lobby. "An accident. That's the best you could come up with. Let me guess. You also saved a box of puppies from a burning building." "It's the truth," Daniel said, his voice trembling. "I have a daughter, Simon. She's sick. We lost our apartment. I just need a chance. I'm good at what I do. You know I am. Just get me 10 minutes with Penhaligon. I'll work for half the salary. I'll work nights. Anything." Simon stepped closer, his face hardening. He lowered his voice to a cruel hiss. "Look at you, Daniel. You're shaking. Your clothes are dirty. You look unstable. Vanguard Holdings builds skyscrapers. We don't run a charity ward. You had your shot. You blew it. Now get out before I call security to drag you out." Daniel stood there, the words hitting him like physical blows. He looked around the lobby. People were staring, businessmen in suits, women in heels, all looking at him with a mix of pity and disgust. He was done. The fight had finally left him. "Okay," Daniel whispered. "Okay. I'll go." He turned around, his shoulders slumped defeated. He began the long walk toward the revolving doors. He had to go back to the hostel, grab Lily, and go where the bridge, a shelter. Stop him! The voice rang out across the lobby like a whip crack. It was female authoritative, and loud enough to silence the entire room. Daniel paused. He didn't turn around. He assumed it was security coming to expedite his exit. I said, "Stop that man!" The clicking of crutches echoed on the marble floor. Fast, angry clicks. Simon Cress looked past Daniel, his face paling instantly. "Ms. Sterling." Daniel turned slowly. Coming toward him was a woman. She was flanked by a tall man in a suit, Robert, and 2 security guards who looked terrified. She was wearing a fresh power suit, but her left leg was in a cast and a bandage covered her forehead. She was moving with a fierce determination, swinging her body forward on the crutches. It was her. The woman from the alley. Daniel's mouth fell open. "Evelyn!" Simon Cress looked between them, confused. "Ms. Sterling, I'm handling this. This vagrant was just harassing the staff. I was just escorting him." "Shut up, Simon," Evelyn snapped, not even looking at him. She stopped 3 feet from Daniel. She was breathing hard from the exertion. She looked him up and down, taking in the dirty sweater, the exhaustion in his eyes, the sheer defeat in his posture. She saw the man who had covered her with his only suit jacket, the man who had held her hand while the rain froze them both. "You," Evelyn said, her voice softening, losing its corporate edge. "You came." Daniel stammered, completely bewildered. "I came to apologize for missing the interview." "You came to apologize?" Evelyn let out a breathy, incredulous laugh. She turned to the room, raising her voice. "This man came to apologize." She pointed a crutch at Simon Cress. "Simon, do you know why Mr. Harper missed his interview on Tuesday?" Simon swallowed hard, sweat beading on his forehead. He said there was an accident." "There was," Evelyn said. "I was the accident." A murmur went through the lobby. The receptionist stopped typing. Security guards exchanged glances. "I was hit by a car in the alley behind Blackwood Bistro," Evelyn announced, her eyes boring into Simon's. "I was bleeding out. I was going into hypothermia. Hundreds of people walked by." But Daniel stopped. She turned back to Daniel. "You gave me your coat. You missed your meeting. You knew you would lose the job. But you stayed." Daniel felt the room spin. Your vanguard." "I am the CEO, Daniel," Evelyn said softly. "I am Evelyn Sterling." Daniel felt his knees go weak. The woman he had saved, the woman he had sacrificed everything for, owned the building he was being kicked out of. "I tried to find you," Daniel said, his voice barely audible, "after the ambulance left. But I had to deal with the eviction." "I know," Evelyn said. She stepped closer, ignoring the pain in her leg. She reached out and took Daniel's rough, scarred hand in hers. "I know everything, Daniel. I know about Sarah. I know about the apartment. I know about Lily." At the mention of his daughter's name, Daniel's composure cracked. A tear traced a line through the dirt on his cheek. "She's sick," Daniel choked out. I can't." "It's over," Evelyn said firmly. "The struggle is over, right now." She turned to Robert. "Robert, give me the file." Robert stepped forward and handed her a thick envelope. Evelyn pressed it into Daniel's chest. "What is this?" Daniel asked. "Open it." Daniel's shaking hands tore open the envelope. Inside was a check, a cashier's check. He looked at the number. £50,000. That covers the medical debt, Evelyn said. Consider it a consultation fee for your services as a crisis management expert on Tuesday. Daniel stared at the check. It was more money than he had seen in 3 years. He couldn't breathe. And Evelyn continued pulling a second document from Robert's folder. This is an employment contract. Daniel looked at the paper. Position Senior Project Lead. Salary £120,000 per annum, plus benefits. It's unsigned, Evelyn said. Director Penhaligon is waiting in the elevator. We're going up to the 40th floor right now. You're going to do the interview, Daniel. Not because I owe you, but because I've seen your resume, and frankly, you're the only person I trust to run this project. Anyone who prioritizes a stranger's life over their own ambition is the kind of leader I want at Vanguard. She looked at his clothes. We have a spare suit in the executive wardrobe. It might be a little big, but it's dry. Daniel looked from the check to the contract, then up at Evelyn's blue eyes. The same eyes that had looked so scared in the alley, now filled with gratitude and power. Why? He whispered. Because you didn't leave me, she said simply. Evelyn turned to Simon Cress, who was now trembling visibly. Simon, she said, her voice dropping to 0 degrees. Pack your desk. You're fired. Miss Sterling, please, I didn't know. You judged a man by his shoes, Simon, and you blacklisted a hero because he didn't dance to your tune. Get out of my building. Simon Cress wilted. He turned and walked away, the click of his heels, sounding like a retreat. Evelyn turned back to Daniel. She smiled a genuine, warm smile. Now, Mr. Harper, I believe you have a daughter who needs a nebulizer refill and some strawberry ice cream. Shall we get to work? Daniel nodded, unable to speak. He wiped his face with his sleeve. He took a step toward the elevators, walking beside the CEO not as a beggar, but as an equal. For the first time in 2 years, the weight of the world was gone. The view from the 40th floor of the Pinnacle Tower was breathtaking. London sprawled out below like a toy city, the cars merely specks of light in the early evening gloom. But Daniel wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at the employment contract lying on the mahogany desk. The interview with Director Penhaligon had been a blur, but a successful one. Once Daniel had shaken off the shock, his old instincts had kicked in. He knew the waterfront project's zoning laws better than Penhaligon did. He pointed out a flaw in their supply chain logistics within 5 minutes. By the end of the hour, Penhaligon wasn't hiring him because Evelyn Sterling told him to. He was hiring him because Daniel was brilliant. Welcome to Vanguard, Daniel, Penhaligon said, shaking his hand firmly. We need someone with your eye for detail. HR will process the paperwork, but you're on the payroll as of this morning. Evelyn was waiting in her office. She had a new set of clothes waiting for him, not a suit this time, but high-quality casual wear that fit him properly. I took the liberty of arranging temporary accommodation, Evelyn said, handing him a key card. Vanguard owns a corporate apartment block in Canary Wharf. Unit 4B. It's fully furnished. The fridge is stocked, and I believe a nebulizer solution delivery has already been made to the concierge. Daniel felt the sting of tears again. Evelyn, I don't know how to thank you. I can pay you back for the rent once my first check clears. It's part of the relocation package, she said, waving him off. Go get your daughter, Daniel. Go be a dad. The ride back to the hostel in Hackney was surreal. This time Daniel wasn't walking in the rain. He was sitting in the back of the Maybach. When the sleek black car pulled up in front of the crumbling hostel, people on the street stopped to stare. Daniel ran inside. Mrs. Gable was sitting on the bottom bunk reading a story to Lily. "Daddy," Lily cried out, jumping down. She looked pale, her breathing audible in the quiet room. "Pack up, lil' bit," Daniel said, grinning so hard his face hurt. "We're leaving." Mrs. Gable looked at him confused. "Leaving where it's nearly dark, Danny?" "We got the castle." "Mrs. Gable," Daniel said, hugging the older woman. "We got the castle." He pressed £500 into Mrs. Gable's hand. Money Evelyn had given him as a cash advance. "This is for everything. For believing in us." "Danny, I can't take this." "Take it. Buy something nice. And come visit us." 10 minutes later, Daniel and Lily were in the car. Lily's eyes were wide as saucers as she touched the leather seats. "Is this a spaceship?" she whispered. "Better," Daniel said, buckling her in. When they arrived at the new apartment, it was warm. That was the first thing Daniel noticed. It wasn't damp. It didn't smell like mold. It smelled like lavender and clean linen. The living room had floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the river. The kitchen was stocked with food. On the counter sat a brand-new nebulizer machine, boxes of medication, and a giant gallon-sized tub of premium strawberry ice cream. Daniel set up the machine. For the first time in months, he watched Lily take her medicine in a warm, safe room, sitting on a velvet sofa. Her breathing eased. The wheeze disappeared. Later that night, after 2 bowls of ice cream, he tucked her into a bed that was soft and clean, with a duvet that looked like a cloud. "Daddy," Lily mumbled, half asleep. "Yeah, baby." "Did the magic suit work?" Daniel looked at his new clothes, then out the window at the city lights. He thought about the ruined charcoal jacket he had left in the alley, the one that had kept Evelyn warm. "Yeah, a little bit," Daniel whispered, kissing her forehead. "It worked. But it wasn't the suit. It was the heart inside it." He walked to the window, watching the rain start to fall over London again. But tonight, he was on the other side of the glass. He was safe. He was home. And tomorrow, he had work to do. Daniel Harper thought he had lost everything when he stopped to help a stranger in the rain. He didn't know that the universe was watching, in a world that often tells us to look out for number one. Daniel proved that kindness is the only currency that truly matters. He gave his coat to a freezing woman, and in return, he got his life back. It's a powerful reminder that we never know who we are helping or how that one act of grace might change our own destiny. If this story touched your heart, please take a moment to hit that like button. It really helps us share these stories with more people. What would you have done in Daniel's shoes? Would you have stopped? Let us know in the comments below. And don't forget to subscribe and ring the bell so you never miss a story that inspires. Thanks for watching. And remember, be kind always.